Hi, everyone. My name's Lawrence Lek, and I'm an artist and filmmaker. I thought for concrete love, I could do what I do best, which is play video games, which I've managed to turn into a career somehow. And if anyone wants to play this open-world game 2065 afterwards, just let me know. I'll be happy for everyone to have a go. So the talk I originally had planned was really intellectual. It's about like art history and how I see video games participating in this much wider evolution of what art is, art with a capital A. But instead of that, after talking to some people yesterday, I decided to actually just really talk about my process as a world builder, as a filmmaker, as a musician, and as a video game designer, because I realized that for a lot of people, even though they might have grown up playing video games or watching films, very often the labor that's embedded in the work of art or in the piece of software is hidden. And I personally feel that this idea of, what is that Isaac Asimov quote, technology is magic, and indistinguishable from magic, and kind of disappears once it's been done well. As someone who struggles daily with building virtual worlds and films and trying to earn a living from it, I can fully say that the amount of labor that my own work is built on, the video game engines that I'm working with, the operating systems, the networks, it's all built on countless people who I don't know. If anyone starts up Photoshop, there's that list of, thanks to X, Y, and Z, John, Tom, and Emma. I thank all those people, who I'm sure many of you are today, who build the tools that I can use in order to do my work. So this particular video game, it's called 2065. It's set in the year 2065, which is the centennial of the founding or independence of Singapore, which is the country where my family now live. The reason it's called 2065 is this idea of a centennial, 100 years, what has happened since 1965 and 2065 in Southeast Asia, which is the place I'm most familiar with. In 1965, when Singapore became independent, you had the Vietnam War, called the American War in Vietnam, that was happening just about 1,000 miles away. And this island nation somehow became a centralized, I guess, technocratic, to some extent authoritarian state that, compared to a lot of other places in the world, today is seen as this kind of base or center of a certain kind of economic development first model in which the quality of living, the standards of living, education has risen, but it's kind of come at a price. Some of you might be familiar with the science fiction author William Gibson, and in 1994 he wrote an essay called Disneyland with the Death Penalty about Singapore, about how he went there and he thought, oh wow, this clean modernist city, centrally planned, it's so good for economic development, but what has the price been? The price has been this certain kind of erasure or neutrality, this clean slate that technology and industry could be built on. That was actually the world that I spent my childhood, and it's very strange because when I grew up in London after that. So when I moved to London, I was like, oh, I'm so glad I'm not in that place anymore, because schools were so crowded, education was incredibly disciplinarian and actually quite strict. And so I loved being in London, this liberal society. But now, when I read the essay again, it's kind of strange. It's kind of strange because I was like, Disneyland with the death penalty. So William Gibson, being an American science fiction author, then moved to Canada. It's like, hang on a second. Disneyland, there is Disneyland and Disney World in America, firstly, and many states still do have the death penalty as well. So I think, isn't that strange that this amount of embedded bias in Wired magazine, this was about the second year of its operation, is so ingrained in my own consciousness, in my own view. And I think, don't get me wrong, William Gibson is a brilliant author. He coined the term cyberspace and kind of inspired many different visions that are still being built today. But realizing these things made me want to make a game, really, that brought together my different interests, obviously, in this globalized world, in this what video games are as a medium, and how I can bring my love of, I guess, narrative filmmaking and awareness of the cultural importance of, well, entertainment and art into some of these different things. So if I could ask you to slightly direct your view to the game, apologies to people in this bit, and I'm going to give a kind of, I guess, what is it, like director's tour through the game. So some of you might know the seminal 1993 video game Doom. Doom was a precursor to many fully three-dimensional environments. In fact, Doom itself was a 2.5-dimensional game, but the same creators, id Software, later went on to make Quake, the first true three-dimensional game. What does 3D actually mean for people who might not actually understand it so well is that whereas early video games were two-dimensional because of limitations of computing, 3D games, because of improved computation, can render three-dimensional environments. That means you can go up, down, left, and right, whereas in platform games you can go left to right, up and down. So your sphere of immersion is very different in a three-dimensional game. The starting point for these games is really important. Where do you start in the world? In this case, I wanted to start the player in front of my exhibit, which was for the 2019 Singapore Biennial. The actual installation, which was at the Asian Civilizations Museum, which is this museum of colonial history, was this kind of gaming room setup where you have these 4 racing chairs playing the game I'm playing right now on widescreen monitors. And along the back, what's important to me is that it's not just the game, but it's also a trailer or a video that talks about the world in which this game has been made. So this is a video trailer for 2065, and imagine, whatever, like Sony's releasing a new edition of a new game, and they've released this trailer, except I've designed the trailer. So the narrative is really weird and screwed up. When I'm making the video, I'm also thinking like a cinematographer, not just as a game designer. So I'll just let some of the trailer play, and I'll kind of talk over it.
在2065年，远见公司发掘出如何利用人工智能的力量。街道上空无一人，无人再踏上旅程，只因虚拟比现实更真实。算法已代替了所有的工作。人们与人工智能在网络游戏中日夜对战。他们甚至不用作弊，因为人工智能总让人类获胜。电子竞技是全球发展速度最快的行业。政客们称之为瘾，玩家们称之为演化。拒绝在电子竞技奥运会上认输后，一对游戏机器人脱离了远见。这些人工智能对所有游戏都已操纵自如。如今，他们想成为艺术家，宣称自己为中华未来主义者，以发布名为2065的电子游戏来建立他们的运动。 有赢家，没有输家的游戏。在开放世界中探索，这是反映玩家心智的一面镜子。
So one of the really interesting things that I thought, just reflecting on some of the previous conversations, is this idea of data and subjectivity. I think as an artist and a filmmaker, I'm much more invested in this idea of, the subjectivity, the first-person point of view, the individual's journey through the world, discovering new things, and trying to puzzle out some kind of meaning for each individual person. The game 2065 is really meant to be an open-world game, as the trailer says, for exploration, a mirror to reflect the mind of the player. What I thought I wanted to do to try and make a game as an artwork, because the difference between, there's not that much difference in a sense, but having a game without winners, without losers, without goals, without high scores, without death and without birth, without limited lives or unlimited lives, there's a way to create a different sort of engagement with the cityscape that I just wanted to explore, really. So with the game itself, the game I started making in 2018 for an exhibition at a place in Hong Kong called K11. And so this site-specific exhibition was a video game of the gallery space itself, which was what we saw. And so now I'm going to walk to Hong Kong from Singapore. Thankfully, there's a teleporter, so these ideas, which can be very narrative and very open-ended, I'm interested in, what does a game world allow that actually a cinematic world doesn't? Because, of course, the language of cinema and of TV that we're very engaged with, this idea of montage, of quick cuts, of blending, dissolves, transitions, vertical, video, horizontal, it's so natural to us today. But of course, as it wasn't always this case. There was the Lumiere brothers, the inventors of cinema, who screened the train arriving at the station, in which people thought that the train was really coming towards them. Now, none of us have this kind of illusion, but we have a different kind of, how should I say, skepticism with the virtual world, which I totally get as well. There's a distance from haptics, from senses of smell and touch, that different technologies try and get closer towards virtual reality, augmented reality, and all this kind of thing. But I personally think that what's really kind of like the glue that binds this together is what kind of, world building isn't just a simulation of buildings. It's really about the narrative that's being brought together in all of these different visions of the future. Another thing I wanted to think about is, where is everybody in these worlds? I'll confess, because I'm designing these things with a very small team, multiplayer games are a complete nightmare to create the back end for. So I thought of using this as an advantage, because for me personally, I like wandering around the city at 3 a.m. There's no one around. You don't think that, there's been a zombie apocalypse or there's been some kind of environmental catastrophe. It's just a place where you can reflect on your thoughts by yourself. I feel that the very moment there's an agent, there's another avatar, whether that's human, animal, robot, whatever, the moment there's another agent in the virtual world, our kind of biological impulse kicks in. We think, is this friend or foe? Are they a threat? Are they a benefit? Are they a non-player character? Are they someone I can engage with, build a relationship with, and so on? There are many, many, many different projects exploring this kind of social interaction and how it can either augment or replace what we call as reality. Personally, I'm just trying to focus on a very specific engagement with a virtual space in which becomes more, not data-driven, but subjective, phenomenological, something really about just my own experience of the different places I've been. So now I'm just going to end with taking a further tour through the K11 gallery that we saw from the trailer, and just talking about how I was thinking about creating a physical exhibition from this video game. So K11 itself is the concept, it's art mall. So it's shopping malls with art galleries in it, and that's extremely Hong Kong, and I love it as well. So initially, I was like, being kind of like Asian and European. The European side of me was a bit cynical. I was like, shopping and art, they shouldn't go together. But then I also realized that for a much younger generation, and it's true for me as well, my engagement with art and culture has been through popular media, especially as a science fiction fan. It's one of the most, I feel science fiction as a genre is one of the most visually and sonically immersive forms of world building that there is, simply because all of those different parameters are open. Another strange thing is, why is it that so often these worlds are not necessarily dystopian, but they have conflict at the heart of them? I was just thinking about Dune, right? So I love Dune. I started by playing the strategy game in the 90s, and that was my entry point into the world of the novel. The novel is about the ecology of a planet called Arrakis, aka Dune. But perversely, it's actually a book about drug addiction, because the planet produces a spice that allows people to navigate the world. And because this drug is so valuable, there's intergalactic conflict over battle for this planet. So even though, of course, it's all, Hollywood remake and all that kind of thing, it's so perverse that the most popular science fiction is about very pressing social and personal issues. I mean, we can also think about Blade Runner and how this idea of, what does the AI want to be and so on, and how does that control the world that they can engage with in. So the installation has the narrative on the left on this kind of ticker tape screen. It has games which people can play, this very 2065 game. And it has a few different segments of the other parts of my world in which this is created. There's Farsight, which is the fictional AI and entertainment company that's built this game. And there's also a trailer for a previous film called Geomancer, which talks about artificial intelligence wanting to be an artist. So this virtual world, in being able to expand and contain many different kinds of media and narratives and worlds and space, is something I feel as it's like a collage medium, basically, but it's a four-dimensional collage medium in which I can create the spaces, the sounds, the textures, and the cinematography that actually help people enter into a different kind of engagement with the world that they might know, but one that's simultaneously, very, very personal to me. And I feel that these questions about, non-human consciousness and the future of, I guess, being in the world are something that I can embed within the films and the work that I do. And I just want to end with this final part of the trailer from the film Geomancer, where the AI asks themselves, what is creativity?
如果我有手，我会是雕塑家；如果我有声音，我会歌唱；如果我有灵魂，我会祈祷。但是我只有心灵的眼睛，所以我梦想世界。
Thank you very much.